team, it's your boy Neal back with another reaction video, guys. Here we are with what made 1990s NBA so special, why it was better than today's game. Do I agree? No. But I never watched 90s NBA. But I do enjoy basketball today, like seeing these superstars do these ridiculous things and put up these unbelievable numbers. And I know there's a lot of backlash about they don't allow you to play defense, they don't allow you to play defense. But there's a handful of good defenders. I'll say a handful. But, I mean, the offense, I feel like, has definitely, I guess, evolutionized, has definitely progressed forward in the things that you can see some of these players able to do. But before we jump into this, make sure you subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, hit a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Social media and Patreon are all up top. You want to subscribe to any of it, put all the links in the description. All you got to do is hit the link, follow me, talk to me, human. I talk back. You guys got a favorite video suggestion? You can subscribe to Patreon and drop it in the comment section. What we got?
Things have changed a lot within the NBA over the last few decades, and although there is certainly a new generation of fans that the modern game appeals to, many traditional fans are having a difficult time finding it as intriguing.
Yes, a lot of traditional fans do not love today. If they were around for the 90s, they don't like today's NBA.
Many traditional fans are having a difficult time finding it as intriguing. A lot of old school fans are very public about their dislike of the current NBA product. And I'm sure many of you viewers fit that description to a T. But without the full context, it's easy for those critics to simply come across like nostalgia-driven, grumpy old men who just want people to get off their lawn, rather than as objective individuals who have legitimate complaints about how the product's quality has declined over time. Today, we're using the NBA in the 1990s as the example and comparing it to the modern game as we analyze
That's disgusting. Oh my god.
In the 1990s as the example and comparing it to the modern game as we analyze the differences that made the 90s brand so special. First off, the physicality. Even going back to the game of basketball's beginning in the late 1800s, it had a very physical presence. So much so that it was even played in a bloody steel cage. Almost a century later, the NBA in the 1980s
a bloody steel cage?
Played in a bloody steel cage. Almost a century later, the NBA in the 1980s featured a very punishing style where basically a no easy layups rule was understood and accepted league-wide. The thing about the 1990s is I feel like this era was the perfect balance between the physicality of the previous eras and the fluidity of the modern game. A major reason for that...
I gotta see some Hakeem highlights, bro. We gotta watch some Hakeem highlights because the only couple highlights I done seen of this man so far, bro. The footwork, the up fakes, oh my god, bro, he's disgusting.
Of the previous eras and the fluidity of the modern game. A major reason for that is the flagrant foul rule was firmly implemented in the year 1990, which means teams like the Bad Boy Pistons and players like Bill Laimbeer could no longer simply assault people in an attempt to win basketball games.
Come on, now that don't tell y'all still want to see stuff like that? No. This man just tried to knock Larry out. He wasn't making a basketball play at all. That's not basketball. That's something else.
Bill Laimbeer could no longer simply assault people in an attempt to win basketball games. The 90s still had a very physical presence, but it wasn't overdone. And with a lack of a defensive 3-second violation, big men were allowed to camp in the paint and protect the rim at pretty much all times. Second is the mentality. Back in the 90s, players were not always so friendly with one another on and off the court, as almost every leader had a sense of pride in their team and teammates. Over the last 10 years, it's become more common for players to work out together in the off-season, and even frequently recruit one another rather than focusing on beating each other. More on the reasons why in a bit. Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of the few exceptions in the modern game, as he's made it abundantly clear that he doesn't work out with the other players in the off-season, and isn't about that buddy-buddy culture. But the exception that Giannis is today was just the norm in the 1990s, as rivalries and a competitive dislike of one another was just more common. Another difference in mentality was the general player.
I think Giannis Antetokounmpo is an absolute monster. I think today, right now, he's the best NBA player. I think he's the best basketball player in the world. Like right now, in this very moment, he's the best player in the game. But I can understand that mentality if you want them to be rivals because fans are rivals. Like, no, that's it. Fans are going to be rivals. But at the same time, working out together in the summer, I feel like if you work out with other stronger players or you work out with other strong players, it can't do anything but help your game because you get to see how other people work out. You get to learn what other people do. And I feel like learning from other strong players is a good thing. And just because your friends outside of the court, on the court, you don't got to be friends. You know what I'm saying? When you step on that court, both guys are trying to win. But once you step off the court, ain't nothing wrong with being friends, at least I think. Being able to learn from those stronger players during workouts. But keep it rolling.
Of one another was just more common. Another difference in mentality was the general player's willingness to play through bumps and bruises.
That's facts.
There's been numerous players who have the reputation of taking
Kawhi, don't even show me Kawhi because it just make me mad. It just make me mad. Bro.
nights off, even when they're healthy, or at least 90% healthy, for the sake of preserving their energy and health for the playoffs. The problem is, if we as fans buy tickets to see our favorite teams play, we expect to see the star players if they're healthy enough to play. But the load managing era has ruined that experience for many people in plenty of instances. It's like Larry Bird once said, that if you're paid to go to work, and you're able to go to work, you go to work. Great players from the 90s like Michael Jordan, Karl Malone, Reggie Miller, and John Stockton have more seasons where they played at least 80 games than seasons that they did not. You can't say that about the careers of modern stars like LeBron James, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and Chris Paul. Number 3. In the 90s, a player building his brand and his popularity was based almost entirely on his on-the-court success. I'm not going to act like this was true in absolutely every instance, as certain players like Dennis Rodman were able to become incredibly well known for things beyond his play on the court.
Oh, wow.
But nowadays, there's so much that a player can do through the internet and through social media to become one of the biggest names in the sport. Is this a negative thing in and of itself? Not necessarily, but what it does do over time is it creates less incentive for these younger players to become the best at their craft. If simply a pretty good player can get a $50 million contract and become well known as a social media personality, what incentive does that player have to become a great player on the court? A player like Steve Kerr was a valuable role player and was one of the most efficient shooters in the league, who played on the team that most people consider as the greatest NBA team of all time. And at that point, Steve was getting paid $750,000 a year. Nowadays, there are plenty of players all over the league who are about as valuable as Kerr was, but in many instances, they're making more than 10 times that amount of money. Even if adjusted for inflation, Steve's contract doesn't come anywhere close.
Well, that's the NBA makes more revenue, though. Like, a lot more revenue. Just because, and shout out to the players in the 90s that helped continue to evolve the game. And know what I'm saying? As the NBA makes more revenue, the players get paid more. That's just how it goes.
Even if adjusted for inflation, Steve's contract doesn't come anywhere close. Number 4. Contracts were longer, which gave fans a larger amount of time to develop an attachment to their stars and role players. In the 80s, Magic Johnson signed a 25-year, $25 million contract. In the 90s, contracts like Michael Jordan's were as long as 8 seasons. And in the NBA today, under this current collective bargaining agreement, the max length of a contract is only 5 seasons. And there's usually a player option around the middle point as well. Nowadays, with short contracts, plenty of options, and frequent trade requests, players are moving from team to team so frequently that it feels like players are just mercenaries for the organizations. This was rarely the case in the golden age of basketball, as most stars were just with one team until they sometimes switched jerseys in the very twilight of their career. Lastly, the NBA in the 90s, for the most part, was a political-free zone. Now, this doesn't mean that players didn't have their own personal politics and convictions back then. Of course they did. But the NBA league office and the brand itself wasn't looking to make public stances on politics like they do today, which back then created an exciting world of escapism where fans could come together and not feel divided by the everyday issues that are constantly being debated. The most focused upon story each night was something related to the game of basketball. Like, will the Knicks finally prevail in their rivalry against Michael Jordan? Or who will assert themselves as the king of all big men, Olajuwon or Robinson? There's two ways the NBA can approach the topic of politics that I would embrace. One, you could have a political-free zone where the NBA brand as a whole refuses to engage in any day-to-day politics and honestly recognizes itself as a non-political organization. Or there's option number two, where the NBA welcomes all kinds of political stances. Players are free to express themselves and however they choose necessary, regardless of their own political affiliation. The problem
I do like that there, because it's kind of like what that woman said when you tell these kind of, I guess, players that they can't have a stance. It's like you're saying, like, just shut up and dribble. Like, it's almost saying like you shouldn't have an opinion, or you can't have an opinion on these political situations. And I guess even if these players say it outside of an NBA thing, is it still like considered a part of the NBA being a political free zone because these players want to speak out on certain circumstances? I think a player should speak out and should be able to speak out on different circumstances because of the platform they have and the reach that they have, and they can open the door for a lot of these situations. I know even for something like I was watching the Magic Johnson documentary, like when he caught AIDS or whatever, it was able to open up a lot of doors for AIDS research and HIV research in that regard. And so I believe, I know actually that may not be political, but I'm just saying I feel like they should be able to have a voice. I don't think you make them silent.
However they choose necessary, regardless of their own political affiliation. The problem with the NBA today is that it does neither of these. The league makes their political stances known and is partisan with those stances. Certain movements the league is openly promoting and in support of, while others it consistently discourages when it doesn't benefit their own interests. Understandably, this kind of hypocrisy pushes some fans away from the sport, which is an issue that was way less present in the more welcoming days of the 1990s NBA.
And, I hope this situation in the Persian Gulf puts sports in perspective. It's supposed to be entertainment. People have gotten out of hand with it, but hopefully sports will get back in its proper context, what it is, entertainment. And I hope for 2 hours a day, the troops over in the Persian Gulf and the fans can forget about everything and just enjoy themselves.
All right.
Thanks for watching, everyone. My name is Johnny Arnett, and I am new to the Geeks and Gamers and Sports Wars team. While I'm here, I'll be providing more scripted and story-driven style content. So make sure to like and subscribe if you're interested in hearing more.
Okay. I respect this video, and I respect the perspective that he's coming from. While I may not necessarily agree with all of his points, I do understand where he's coming from. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to watch the 90s NBA, and so this is the NBA that I watch, and I absolutely love watching the game. Like, I love this game of basketball. I think it's very entertaining. It's very fun to watch. But that's just me. If you guys got a favorite video suggestion, you can subscribe to Patreon or drop it in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Social media and Patreon are all up top. You want to subscribe to any of it, put all the links in the description. All you got to do is hit the link, follow me, talk to me. Phew, man. I'll talk back. I love talking to you guys. You guys are the most incredible team on YouTube. It's your boy Neal, out.